Hello and welcome. My name is Steve Pugh. It's Monday the 7th of June. I must admit this year is going pretty fast. What I try and do this week and every week is introduce you to interesting people that I believe can help your business or career. Today's guest is no exception, and actually it's someone that I know pretty well. So Maureen Wright from Westray Recruitment Group. And one of the things that I think would be really interesting to talk through is that it's always to go into people's backstory about where they came from and how they got into business and how they found it and stuff. And actually use that as a way to both share and inspire other people on their own journey, because actually you often hear from the same people, the Bill Gateses, the Elon Musks and whatever. And actually, I focus on kind of small SMEs, that kind of thing, just real people. So I thought it was really interesting to kind of introduce you to real people. So if you join us for the next kind of 30, 40 minutes, hopefully it'll be interesting to you. If you've got any questions, please feel free to send them in the chat and they'll come up on my screen. And Maureen, I'm just going to bring you in now. There we go. So you're now live. Would you like to say hi to everyone?
Yes, hello everybody, and thank you for inviting me, Steve.
No,
I'm delighted to know that you think I'm interesting enough to have on your podcast.
The funny thing is, some people aren't, and what's awkward is when people ask and I say no.
Well, you've asked me a few times, and here I am.
And last time we had technical difficulties.
I know.
But like in the real world, these things happen, and it's one of the things that when I do the classroom sessions or the Friday things, is that because I'm a real person as you are, as other people are, stuff is going to go wrong, and I just almost just own it. I was pretty mortified when it happened because we just. I know. But and
because I'm a technophobe, I was no help whatsoever. So, but here we are. So better late than never.
No, good stuff. So would you like to give people a quick kind of overview on who you are, where you're from?
Yeah, sure. Right. Well, I'm Maureen Wright. I'm the MD and founder from Westray Recruitment Group. Been in business for 31 years. We have 3 offices: Gateshead, Stockton-on-Tees and Birmingham, which we set up last year during the pandemic. Currently employ approximately 23 staff at the moment, and growing.
Good
Touch wood.
No, it's good. I think one of the things I think people underestimate is that, like last week, I had a guy called Michael Richardson that runs it's a machine shop, kind of industrial tooling type business, but physical kit. And then you have different people that are tech founders and stuff. But I don't think people actually necessarily appreciate how difficult recruitment is. And obviously I see it quite often now. But it's almost, why do you think that is? It's almost that people say recruitment's a really tough gig, which it is. But it's almost, I know we're jumping right into the weeds there, but why do you think it's such a difficult industry to kind of be successful in?
Well, probably because we have one of the worst products in the world, which is people. So I would much prefer to be selling pens or cups or whatever, but people are our product. And unfortunately, they have a tongue in their head, they have a brain, they do what they want to do. But apart from that, it's tough, it's very competitive. There's always new people, setting up what seems like weekly. Mm-hmm. So the market's very saturated. And also a lot of businesses don't actually value what we do, which is a shame because, we're supplying your most important asset, which is your people. So, we're trying to change that perception anyway.
No, it's good. I just wanted to almost start off the interview with that, because actually there might be people that watch this who are like, recruitment's easy, you just pick up the phone, you don't do anything. But that's not the case. And it's almost where I think one of the wins from this interview.
It used to be when I first set up, or when I first got into recruitment back in the 80s, it was a very, very different sector. But yeah, it would be great if it were easy, but no business is easy, but recruitment is particularly tough.
But I think almost just as to set the context for the interview, it's almost where I want people to know how difficult it is. And we'll go into some of that kind of thing that actually, and we have this chat quite often, it is a lot more difficult than selling coffee or anything else, because there's so many variables that people can let you down. As where if you're Nissan and you make a car, the car just doesn't decide to not turn up one day. It's that kind of, it's a tough kind of gig. So with every interview, I tend to kind of go back and almost start from the beginning, where people grew up, what they were like at school and stuff, because you actually get a hell of a lot of people that want to start their own business and do their own thing. And often, the more you can share the background and where people came from and how they went through that journey, it will inspire some more people that actually they think, I could do that.
Yeah.
And then likewise, you're so where I grew up, I didn't necessarily know any business owners, but actually it'd be great to hear from them. So with the beauty of YouTube and stuff now, that if you're from Chesterley Street or whichever, actually seeing people that have come from where you came from, I think that's, what's really kind of important. Yeah. So would you be happy to kind of share a bit about where you grew up, that kind of thing?
Yeah, sure. I grew up in and around Chesterley Street. And literally, I stayed there until I was 18 years of age, and then moved to Liverpool, which I know is your neck of the woods. And then from there, I went to Birmingham. But I had absolutely no ambition whatsoever to start a business. Nobody in my family, had businesses. I didn't know anybody who ran a business. And I, like most people, I fell into recruitment, not like most people, because I think a lot of people do have that ambition to start a business. Mm-hmm. It just seemed like a good idea to me one day. And then I got onto that treadmill. And before I knew it, I was sat in my office and I was a business owner. So no, I had no ambition. Didn't know what I wanted to do when I was at school. I left at 16.
What were you like at school? Were you a naughty kid?
No, actually, I wasn't academic, but I wasn't stupid.
Yeah.
I went to school because I loved sport. So my life in school revolved around the sports teams.
What sports do you play? Or did you play?
I did hockey, I did netball, I did tennis, I did athletics, cross country. I was just always very competitive. And that really stood me in good stead, because I think a lot of business owners are competitive. So it's always spurred me on. It's always, that's what's driven me.
So we got Brian Abbott saying, don't ask Maureen about dogs because she'll talk about it for 30 minutes.
Hello, Brian. It's great that you've tuned in. We'll have to catch up one day.
And Denise Nesbitt saying she loves Maureen's comment about people, which is true. But I think so Denise is someone that's on the roadmap and I talk to quite often now, but it's when you have real people at real businesses, one of the big things that I hate is that when people have this false persona online and they pretend everything's perfect and that they're perfect, and you don't trust it, you don't believe it, but actually what it does, and we'll talk about mental health later, is that you can very easily be looking around thinking that everyone else is this super successful, perfect kind of person when they're kind of not.
Well, I would rather put nothing out than put something out that wasn't authentic or real. I don't like any of that. Can I use the word bullshit? I hate it. So I don't subscribe to that. If I'm putting anything out on social media, it's real, it's me, it's how I feel. But that said, I'm not hugely comfortable with social media. I do just LinkedIn. I don't do Facebook or Instagram.
Or video.
Or video. It's not who I am. I'm really quite shy, actually. So I don't like throwing myself out there, and I'm very private.
Ashley is saying she's still highly competitive. So it's see, I'm enjoying this actually because I can see the questions coming in as well. We mentioned before we actually came on air, would anyone interact? But it's great that people do. But I think also you'll have a lot of people, both people that you're friends with and also competitors. I think you're someone that, because you've been around a long time, like I'm still waiting for Michael Grayson.
Steve. Thank you.
But I mean that the people will respect what you do, and it's almost one of the reasons why I was keen to get you on, is just because when you've had a tough graft and you've done it for a long time, anyone can start a business and do it for a year. But doing it for 5 years, 10 years and keeping it is impressive, and it's that kind of thing that'd be interesting to kind of go through. So what did you do before you started the business?
Well, when I was in school, I didn't know whether I wanted to stay on, go into sixth form, or whether I wanted to go out and find work. So, believe it or not, and it's so weird that I actually did this, considering what I do today, which is find people jobs. But I went into my school foyer to the coin box, and I had my pile of 2 pence pieces for the old kind of black coin box. They weren't even red in those days. They were black. But anyway, and I thought to myself, right, if I'm going to ring around some companies, try and get myself some interviews. If I get a job, I'll go and I'll work. But if I don't, I'll stay on in sixth form. Anyway, as it turned out, I managed to arrange myself a couple of interviews down here on the Team Valley, in actual fact. And my first job was with a company directly over the road. So I was successful in both getting an interview, and I got 2 job offers as well. So I ended up as an accounts assistant, which was completely the wrong job for me. And I was always fascinated by the old woman who sat in a little cubby hole answering the switchboard. She must have been 110. I'm not joking. And I think this is who I'm taking after, actually. But I was fascinated by all of the plugs and the cords, and I wanted to be a switchboard operator. So from there, I actually went to the post office. Who was formerly BT. And I got a job as an operator, 100 directory inquiries. I sat and I used to do that, and I absolutely loved it. I really did.
What age was this?
About 17.
Okay.
Yeah, 17, 18. And whilst I was with the post office, I applied to go on an outward bound course, which was for people, which was for people who needed kind of social skills, developing, bringing out of themselves. Anyway, I failed the interview because they didn't feel that I needed that. But anyway, as it turned out, somebody dropped out. So I was kind of on the reserve list. So I went to this outward bound course and I met a number of people from Liverpool. And that was how I ended up in Liverpool, because I wanted to get away from this area, spread my wings, do something a little bit different. And they said, well, come to Liverpool.
Whereabouts in Liverpool did you end up?
Anfield.
That was pretty rough then.
It was very rough, but I loved it. And because I love football as well, I managed to get a job with Everton Football Club. So I worked there.
I didn't know
that. Yes, I did.
What were you doing?
I worked in promotions, and you probably don't remember a footballer called Mick Lyons, I think it was. I think he was the captain, actually. And I worked on his testimonial. And so, it was great. And that kind of introduced me to selling and, kind of business, really.
I never knew that.
And I loved it. So I'll always have a soft spot for Everton.
See, because that's my home club. So my grandparents, I grew up near the stadium. Yeah. So it was Goodison Park. And it was just, I still remember the first ever game that I went to, which was Everton Sunderland, and it was 0-0. It was the worst game I've ever seen. But as I would have been 10, because we could never afford to go to football as kids. So my uncle and my cousin who had season tickets took me and my brother, and my brother was actually a Liverpool fan. But it was just the noise and the people and walking through the streets was just, as a kid, I'd never seen anything like it.
I remember my first game, awful game, 0-0 as well, Newcastle United against Ipswich. I must have been about 8, and that was it. I was just, I was hooked. It was incredible, and that passion's not left me. Love sport, love football.
Ashley's saying that she didn't know any of this either. So
well, there you go. She doesn't ask me.
Well, at least she's got this to watch back on as well. But I'm
sure she won't.
So what did you do after that?
So the people, my friends from Liverpool, they all worked for the post office, but they worked for National Giro Bank, which was the bank of the post office.
My mum worked there for a little bit. No joke.
Did she?
Yeah, but I think maybe slightly after you. But no, she worked. Yeah, so I know exactly where it is.
Yeah, well, they all moved to Birmingham because Giro Bank wanted to open a Birmingham office, and I didn't work for Giro Bank. I worked for Everton and I did some temping as well. But when I went, we all moved to Birmingham together. It was like friends. We had a shared house. not quite sure which member of Friends I was, but there you go. And it was just absolutely great, parties. It was a great time. It was a great time to be young in the 80s, kind of wine bars had just opened. Socializing was very different because back in the north, it was the working men's clubs and, the pubs and stuff. But being in a big city like Birmingham, there was a lot more going on. So I absolutely loved that. And my first job was selling wine.
Nice.
Spirits. I worked for a wine wholesaler. So I absolutely loved that. It was very social, going to wine tastings, selling wine. Knew nothing about it. Still don't. In fact, I hate wine. Gives me a headache. So I loved that. Loved the job. Loved the customers that I used to work with. But then I decided that I wanted to change because they were moving. So it was a bit more difficult for me to get to from where I lived. So I went into a recruitment agency to look for a job. And they asked me if I wanted to join them. So that was my kind of introduction to recruitment.
Which is funny because that's how John Morris said he got started. He applied for a job that he didn't realize was for a recruiter.
Everybody falls into recruitment like that. Every recruiter, 2 out of 3 recruiters would tell you that that's how they got into recruitment.
So your first job, I guess, it was for a recruiter in Birmingham.
Yeah.
And I must have Ashley saying that she's waiting to see what nuggets are going to come out next. It's just, you'll be this completely different person. Anyway.
I might have more credibility then.
Well, you never know. But often it's funny because I would never interview my mum, although part of me thinks maybe I should, because I know there's going to be so much stuff that I just don't know, that almost would be a crime if you never...
But because, Steve, children think that their parents were born at this age and that we didn't have a life before that. That we didn't socialize, we didn't have fun. We're just seen as grumpy old grown-ups.
But I think
that's not the case.
But what's funny, though, because you had Ashley at kind of the age she is now.
I did, yeah.
And it's almost funny that I always, put myself in my shoes. It's almost... That must be quite a trippy for Ashley, because it's almost like all this stuff that you've done in that time, she could, in theory, still do or will do. You know what I mean? And it's fascinating. I think you are right that people don't always appreciate or even just what other people have been through. Does that make sense? Everyone is always the main character in their own story.
I mean, to be honest with you, I don't have parents now. And a big regret, even grandparents, a huge regret, is that I didn't ask them more about where they come from, their life. I know a lot about, the lives. We were always a close family, but just taking that time to say, well, what did you do when you were this age? And how did you adapt to motherhood? And, because all of my family, the women and the men, were all very hard workers. And I think, obviously, that's where I got my work ethic from. But yeah, I do have that regret that I didn't ask more questions.
I still can't believe you worked in the same gyrobank my mum did.
I didn't work in gyrobanks, Steve.
Close enough, anyway.
Exactly, but my friends did.
No, cool. So at what point did you get the itch to start your own business? Was it after a few years of actually working in recruitment you thought I can do?
Well, what actually happened was my father died when I was 27, and that was a big blow. That shook me a lot. And just a couple of years after that, it just seemed like and actually I had a relationship breakdown as well. I was seeing Ashley's father, in actual fact. And it just wasn't going well. So I thought, you know what, maybe it's time now. My father's just died. I'm going to go back home, and see, and kind of look after my gran as well, because she was still alive and she took it very hard. So I moved back up for a mixture of reasons, really. And then when I came up, I got a job in recruitment on Teesside, and that business actually wanted me to go, and it wasn't doing great. So they asked me just to go and, help resurrect it. So when I was sat there, I was thinking, well, you're kind of doing all of this hard work.
For someone else.
I didn't really know the area that well, but I thought, you're kind of doing all of this graft. Why don't you do it for yourself? And I had some money saved up, which I was going to travel the world. I thought I'll travel the world, which I'd never really done, apart from a few holidays abroad. But I thought, you know what? Keep your money, save your money, put it towards the business, and see what happens. So it seemed like a great idea. And before I knew it, I was seeing the bank manager, and I had an office, I had an accountant, and there I was over the road doing exactly the same. So,
and that was at 30, give or take?
I was 30, yeah.
And pregnant at the time, I think?
Well, I wasn't at the time, but I was 2 months in.
But just in terms of just context, so if I met someone today that just started a brand new business in a very competitive sector that was pregnant and, been through this really tough, that is a tough gig. That is a lot of shit on your plate at the same time.
But I didn't view it like that. I've always been one of these people. You just work with the hand that you've been dealt. Mm-hmm. There's nothing that you can do about it. And I had some pretty crappy things that I've been through, to be honest with you, that I think if you get over certain things, you just get on with it, so I didn't really view it like that. I just thought, right, you're pregnant, you're going to have to make the most of it, so get on with it. And that was what I did. Almost
one of the things that I've discussed with my Lisa a few times is I think people that have been through tougher times are a lot more resilient, but actually complain less, as where people that are a bit snowflakey often haven't been through as much trauma and they complain more. It's one of those things that's almost...
But do you know, I think the thing is as well, Steve, because I grew up in the 70s, so my father, my grandfathers, my uncles, they all worked down the pit. And a lot of them had industrial injuries. Mm-hmm. My grandfather was paralyzed. And I'd seen kind of a lot of struggle that my family had gone through. So nothing was going to be any worse than that. So, and I saw how they dealt with it. Mm-hmm. It was just part of their life. They've had seen a hell of a lot worse than I had. So nothing was ever going to be as bad as that, if that makes sense.
No, that's cool. So how was your first year in business? How were you Westray from the start, or was it more?
It was horrendous. It was bloody awful. It was always going to be Westray. Westray is my maiden name. That's where that came from.
I didn't know that. I was going to ask you where it came from.
It was my maiden name. And, I always hated it when I was at school. No, I wanted to be a Smith or a Brown or something that, I always hated my name, but I thought, no, that's what I'm going to call the business. So, no, it was a tough first year, but, not more so than because I was pregnant just a couple of months in. So I had morning sickness, but other than that, I was pretty fit. I was still exercising. So, I can't grumble about how bad my pregnancy was. Plus, I had to get on with it. I couldn't sit with my feet up, so I'd be running out to throw up, but then I'd be back on the phone trying to generate some business. And then when Ashley did come along, I used to take her into work with me. So, I'd be trying to keep her quiet while I was on the phone, and I'd be breastfeeding as well. I don't mind saying that was
probably before Zoom, though, isn't it?
The breastfeeding lasted about 3 weeks. It didn't fit in with my lifestyle at the time. But by then, I'd actually employed somebody as well. So there was me and another girl, and she was a great help. But that said, before that, if I just wind back a little bit, business, when I first set it, wasn't going as well as I'd have hoped that it would. So the assistant bank manager, who was my contact at the bank, was putting pressure on me, telling me that, sorry, you're not generating enough business. We're going to have to stop supporting you. It's just not viable, et cetera, et cetera. So, and I'm thinking, well, bloody hell, what am I going to do? And it was 1990. It was a recession as well. It was one of the major recessions that we'd had. So nobody wanted to speak to me. It was just a nightmare. So anyway, he gave me 2 weeks. He said, you've got 2 weeks. If nothing happens, then I'm sorry, but that's it. So anyway, I got past the first week and I thought, well, this is it. I'm pregnant, no job. He's breathing down my neck. I'll ring him and plead for a stay of execution. But I knew that he would say no, because I also had a dog, and the week before I'd met him on the corner where my office was, and my dog had jumped up in his nice crisp white shirt with his dirty paws. So he really didn't like me. He liked me even less after that. But anyway, I rang him and he wasn't in. He was on holiday. So I got to speak to the actual branch manager in the days when you could just walk into the bank. So he said, look, come and see me. Went to see him, and he agreed to support me. He said, right, okay, we'll go with it. And 2 weeks after that, I still had no business, but I got a call from a client that I'd been speaking to, and he wanted about 20 pipe fitters and welders and, kind of tradespeople that I didn't have a clue what they did, because it just wasn't something that, I was an office recruiter. I've been placing secretaries. So what did a pipe fitter do? But, when under those circumstances, you learn quick. Mm-hmm. So pretty quickly, I managed to kind of fulfill that contract. And I'll forever be grateful to that business and to the bank manager at the Royal Bank of Scotland on Albert Road in Middlesbrough, who I'm sure will not be with us at the moment. Yeah. But
because do you think that's one of the reasons why you're so hot on customer service and always giving people a chance, because people did with you when you needed it?
I'm just obsessive. When I worked for the post office, I worked for a bunch of that telephone exchange was run by women of a certain age, women my age now, but they taught me so much about how to speak properly, customer service, how to deliver, and a lot of it comes from that. Plus, when I worked for the wine shipper, I worked for a chap who used to work for them on a part-time basis, but he was an ex-naval admiral. Mm-hmm. And he just did this job because he wanted to continue working. And he took me under his wing and taught me about sales and just how to be a bit more savvy. And again, he will no longer be with us, but I will forever be grateful to him. Mm. So older people have always been a big influence on me.
Okay. I think it's great. So would you like to tell people about what Westray Recruitment do now? This can be your sales pitch.
Well, so we started in Middlesbrough on Albert Road, and because I had 2 children in quick succession, glutton for punishment, I know, 2 children under the age of 2, I needed to be, because I was living up on Tyneside at the time, well, actually in Beamish. So I needed to be back up this way because I needed support from family and so on and so forth. So I opened an office up here in Gateshead. So that's where the move into actually Washington at the time. And we actually had 5 offices at one time, which you may or may not know. But that was a big mistake. So I pared it right back to keep the 2 offices. And we pivoted. I had to, because manufacturing work was becoming more prevalent. People were taking contract, kind of temporary, volume temporary workers, which they'd not done before. So we kind of jumped on that bandwagon. So now I'm going around the houses a bit, but our main areas of expertise are industrial and manufacturing, engineering, commercial, and we do some senior work as well. So there are 4 main areas out of Birmingham, Gateshead and Stockton.
But I think almost because of the history and doing it for so long, and actually almost when you learn to adapt, because that's the big thing. Anyone can launch a business that does whatever. But then when something goes wrong, which it will, or, market slows down or clients disappear or whatever, just being able to pivot, you essentially get that little bit better each time and more efficient, and you learn what works and what doesn't work. And just almost any business that's been around for so long, in theory, has to be good at what it does, because actually if they were shit, people would leave and they go somewhere else. So and we've got that longevity now, 31 years. I've seen a number of competitors come and go. So, we have got that longevity, and I'm really, really proud of that. And also we're a family business now, as well, as with my 2 daughters actually in the business. But Ashley takes more of a leading role. I don't think Sadie's altogether kind of convinced that it's the career for her. But yeah, so kind of that's changed the dynamic because, for many years it was just me. But now, kind of Ashley's in the business. So I've got somebody to bounce off and share things with. Because how do you find that dynamic? So one of my questions was going to be about the dynamic of a family business. Because you've also got Stephen Hodgson as well. It's your cousin.
Yeah, Stephen's my cousin. Stephen and I have very different roles within the business. Stephen is our FD. He looks after all of the finance. I don't have to worry about anything like that. And as a business owner, that is a huge pressure off my shoulders, because you can't be exceptional at everything.
Yeah.
And I know that a lot of business owners have had their fingers burnt with finance people, fleecing them, for want of a better expression. But I trust Stephen implicitly, and he trusts me implicitly. So we don't our roles don't cross.
Because what's interesting just on that is that I think, because I see a few different businesses that all do different things, and it's when you have people from different skill sets and different backgrounds that interact, but they each bring something different to the party. And I think, you need the figurehead, the leader, the MD, who will drive forward. And actually, in some ways, having a slightly more sensible, safe pair of hands means that it shouldn't probably skyrocket or go out of control, if that makes sense. It's the right balance of partnership that kind of works. And I think sometimes you need that.
It does work. And, over the years, I've always wanted somebody else to work alongside me, because, it's lonely when you're responsible for generating the business, you're executing the business, the success of the business, employing staff, paying the wages. And, I set up at 30, I'd not been to uni. I've not got a business degree. I didn't even know the theory behind it. I didn't know what a balance sheet was, or the P&L. None of that. So, I didn't even know about that before I set up my own business. So I had to learn on the hoof as it happened. And there was no YouTube videos or TED Talks or anything like that to learn from. There wasn't even a lot of business books that you could read. Not that I had time to read business books, because I was busy, with a 1-year-old. So everything that I've learned, or in the early stages, was trial and error. It was gut instinct. It was what felt right. And some of it was wrong. I made some huge mistakes, hired some kind of terrible people. But, you learn. And
But say on that point, I think when at the start of the interview, when we're talking about authenticity, there might be business owners that watch this that maybe don't know Westray, but maybe do now. And it's if you buy into someone's own journey that, from what exactly what we've just said, because everyone kind of goes through that, it makes you like and trust them more because you feel that you can relate with them. And again, that's why I think it's really important, because say for some of the Westray stuff, then we really like own the personalities and who we are. I'm very, honest about that. I still think that's the right way to do it rather than pretend everything's perfect, because you've always got that thing at the back of your stomach where you don't trust it, you don't believe it. And it's that you can't fake that integrity. And that's why, I try and use video quite a lot, because you can't fake hand gestures and tone of voice and that kind of thing. So recruitment is notoriously competitive because in theory, there's low barriers to entry. Anyone in theory can kind of set up. So you've got a lot of competition. People have got their own, networks and stuff. Why is it, do you think, Westray have been able to be so successful, over time?
Actually, just on that point about low barriers to entry, when I first set up, you had to have a license and you had to be interviewed and had references taken up, and, somebody would come out and see you from the agency inspectorate. And I actually think that should be reinstated. I think that there shouldn't be a low barrier to entry because there's such a lot riding on it.
Yeah.
So sorry, I've lost my train of thought there.
Okay.
What was your question again?
Basically, in such a competitive marketplace, what is it that you feel is why Westray or are doing really well and growing even through a pandemic?
Yeah, I think that because now I've got a great team of people, and people that have been with me for a long period of time. Recruitment notoriously has that revolving door. People tend to join a business, leave after a short time, go on to another recruitment business, and then go on to another one after that. Touch wood, I'm quite fortunate that I have had people leave me. Of course I have, but my key people have stayed with me for quite some time. And I'm very grateful for that they've put up with me for as long as they have, because, I am a hard taskmaster and I need to tell myself sometimes.
But the thing is,
that perfection doesn't exist, because I always strive for perfection.
But so did Steve Jobs, and in some ways I do with what I'm doing, even when we spoke before about trying to get every little thing as good as it possibly can be, because the best people do. That's why you're in business. Like when you're saying before about being competitive, when I spoke to Michael Richardson last week from ACT, he said he loves to win. He doesn't even care what it is, he just wants to win. And something that we've joked about in the past is almost when you're trying to race the woman at the checkout at the supermarket to pack quicker than she can scan items. I love to...
I would. It's like a game, isn't it? But I think, and when I'm looking to hire people, actually, I'm always interested in if they do sport or have a sporting background, if their parents have had a business, because they grow up, around that entrepreneurial kind of in that bubble, if you like. But I think being interested in sport just gives you that competitive edge. It makes you know what it's like to win. And I certainly took that from, the teams that I used to play for into the business environment. I don't have to win at all costs. I know when to back off, and but I used to be kind of, when I was playing sport, I did have to win at all costs, actually. So I take that back.
No, cool. So Westray are very passionate, and you yourself are very passionate on a range of topics. Yeah. You've got the environment, you've got dogs, which someone mentioned before, and mental health, that kind of thing. Why do you feel it's important as a business to support those kind of things?
Well, the mental health thing came, obviously, some people might know that my father took his own life when I was 27. And to be honest with you, I never used to tell people how he died. He got into a depression because he had a brain injury. So I always just said, he had a brain injury and he died, because there was that stigma around it. And still is to a certain degree. Things have got better and we open up conversations about mental health, but it's nowhere where it needs to be. So there was that. Obviously, Ashley's had her own struggles as well, which she's spoken about. So, I'm not breaking any confidences there. She's talked openly about that. And plus, on our industrial and manufacturing desk, we work with a lot of young people, young men who struggle. And over the years, I've had people sit and cry to me because they're struggling. They've not got guidance, no role models. They've not been taught things, and they've got nobody to speak to. So, we have a big temporary workforce who go out and earn us money. So the least that we can do is to be there for them and to give them a space where they can come and open up and speak to us, and they do. And so with that in mind, we're just about to launch our Wellness at Westray initiative, which is predominantly for our temporary workforce, where they know they'll have a safe space to open up. We can signpost them to different places. We work with a wellness expert anyway for the business, for our internal personnel. So he's on board to help should we need him. But it's just to allow people that ability to open up, because sometimes all it takes is a conversation, maybe to allow them to have a cry, give them a cuddle, wearing masks, of course, at the moment, but, just to let them know that somebody does actually care for them and that we value what they do for us. And, we want to help them if they find themselves in that situation.
Yeah, I must admit, because obviously this is a business strategy podcast, so we talk about lots of kind of things that businesses either can do to help them differentiate themselves and that kind of thing. But almost it's the when you have passionate values on a topic and you're not afraid to talk about them, that in itself can be a USP. That there'll be people that watch this and resonate with that want to be involved, that can differentiate you against other people, but also because you've got the authentic story and the reason behind it. You're not just saying, we support mental health because it's cool to do it now and everyone else is. And I've got a former employee that did that, which is terrible. But it's almost the point is, it doesn't matter what, even if you make cupcakes, there are things that you can do with what you're passionate about, what makes you unique, etc., that helps you stand out in the marketplace.
Yeah. I mean, to be honest with you, Steve, I find, because I'm a woman of a certain age, I grew up in the 70s, and, I touched on before what my relatives had been through. So I kind of grew up with that mentality, get on with it, etc., etc. And when you're brought up with that viewpoint, mental health can be difficult for somebody of my age to understand if you've not been exposed to it yourself. I've been exposed to it through my children, through my father. So it is a difficult subject for somebody to understand that's not being exposed to it. But, I'm learning, and I know that, kind of some people might look great on the outside, but inside they're dying.
But what got me is that, so growing up, I didn't know anyone that had ever suffered with depression. I just didn't. And then when I was at uni, I kind of got exposed to it, but I was probably like 24 at the time. But it was new to me, and obviously being around someone that really suffered with it pretty badly, I grew up a lot in that time just because it was something brand new. That the way I originally handled it wasn't because I was mean or anything. I just didn't know what it was.
No, exactly.
But especially now, I've got very close family, and you hear very often a lot of people do suffer. And, sometimes 11-year-old kids that don't want to go back to school after COVID, or there's something going on. And it's heartbreaking. And it's But
so many people now, when I think back, kids would joke about the nutter that lived up the road or whatever. But these might have been people that had dementia or were suffering, with mental health. But we didn't talk about stuff like that back in the day. And now that even dementia, is out there, because that is awful. I mean, you just can't imagine what that must do to families, when they lose somebody to dementia. Yet they've not lost them because they're still here, but they've lost the person that they were. I mean, that just breaks my heart to think about that. But and that's why it's just so great now that we're having these open conversations. But, when we're in kind of Pride Month as well, that gay people can walk down the street holding hands and, do all of that stuff. We have come on so far, but, there's still so much further.
Can I tell you a story on that one?
Yes, please.
So basically, I used to live in Kingston in Jamaica. And this was 2010-ish. No, it wasn't. It was before that. It was 2007, 2008. And you have carnival every year where obviously, same as you do in Trinidad and stuff. We have the big floats and the whatever.
Yeah, like the Notting Hill thing.
Yes, just the proper one. Anyway.
But better.
And, I remember once, and actually I've got a really good photo of it, that you had thousands and thousands of people, as you do, walking with the crowd, with the music going and drinking your Red Stripe and stuff. And I actually got pickpocketed that day, but regardless. But I remember once there was these two gay guys, Jamaican, walking against the crowd, just having a nice time. But it's at the time, I don't want to comment for what it's like now.
Yeah.
It was causing a stir. People were pointing. And what actually happened was that it turned into a bit of a mob. And the police actually bundled them into the back of a van, if you put it that way, but with glass windows. And people started rocking the van and smashing the windows. And I've got this photo somewhere. And it was of a kid trying to escape the broken glass. And it was all because it was so homophobic that it almost, in theory, caused a riot.
I can quite believe it.
Because what almost breaks my heart regardless if I'm a straight man or not, but it's the feeling that person can't be themselves, but almost knowing, like I've got friends that I went to school with that came up to their parents when they were, I guess, 18 or so, and their parents actually disowned them.
Absolutely.
And it breaks my heart. So almost anything now that, I try to be as inclusive as I can, accepting or whatever, but just it still happens, and you still get people now that worry about talking about different things or whatever. And just to be that person that feels that they have something inside them that they want to express, but they can't for religious reasons or whatever, it breaks my heart. It's
I couldn't agree more. It's and that it's still prevalent. I mean, it's still prevalent in this country, but around the world. And what can you say about that? We've still got so far to go, but we're on the right track, and we're having conversations. But
I think on that point, I think what's important is that when people always say it's always important to say what you stand for when you communicate with the world, but almost making it clear what you stand against. And you always see that if someone makes a racist joke or something, actually saying, look, that's not okay. And it's that balance.
And equally as well, racism. And now again, I grew up in the 70s where it was terrible. Well, actually, I was never exposed to racism. We had some Indian people in our school, and we loved them. It was because we'd not had that in our school before, so we all wanted to be their friend, and it was great. But I know that it wasn't like that in London. We had the what was the National Front then, and it was absolutely awful. And I've not been exposed to that. And again, it's difficult when you know that you're not racist to put yourself in that situation and try and understand it. I mean, we can't begin to understand what it must be like to...
What's your viewpoint, I know you're a football fan, about people that booed the England team for taking a knee at the England game the other day, and they're going to do it? Gareth Southgate basically said that throughout the tournament...
Did they? I didn't know that they did
and
that.
It's sad because it was at the Riverside, so it was Middlesbrough as well. But I think for some people, so the players, and rightly so, have said, look, we've got a platform. We're choosing to do this to stand up for people and show that we're passionate about it. As a country, we're passionate about it because, in the past, especially at football, there's been like monkey chants in Russia and stuff and whatever. But it's almost where people booed, and I don't think they actually did it because they are racist. I think they almost, they worry about being woke culture and people almost being too far open about stuff. And I think it's this really difficult balance of, well, it was cancel culture for a while, wasn't it? Where people would try and shut down, get a celebrity fired because they said something 10 years ago.
Yeah.
And I think
actually, there's been something in the news today about a young cricket player.
8 years ago.
I heard that on the news this morning. I mean, you want the youth of today. And, my son, he's very much into, different causes and so on and so forth. You want the youth, the young people to be having these conversations, because it's the only way that cycle is going to change.
Yeah, I agree.
So they need to be bringing up their own children to know that it's wrong. But it's a difficult one. But I always say Smokey Robinson, the great Motown singer, he once said, if we all walked into a room and peeled off our skin, nobody would know what colour you are. So I just don't get the racism thing. But, it is what it is. We've just got to do our bit to make sure that we try and change things.
But I think, just on that point, just I'm going to wrap it up, is that I like the fact that Westray isn't afraid to talk about things that it's passionate about and do stuff. Because a lot of people they stay very vanilla. They don't want to rock the boat, so they end up saying nothing. So actually, almost when you you're never shy to share your opinions on social media, especially if someone says something that you disagree with.
I don't always. Sometimes I do check myself though, and I might want to say something. I've learned to kind of think first before that knee-jerk reaction, but. So I do check myself, but again, if I've got something to say, I wouldn't say it purposely to hurt somebody, like some people do on social media. Mm-hmm. And that's why I don't like Facebook. My platform is LinkedIn, primarily for business, but to be honest with you, I hate social media. I think that has a lot to do with the poor mental health of a lot of kids as well. I just hate how it all works, how bullying's allowed. I think there should be more controls. I think Facebook, Instagram, I think they should be doing more. I encourage my kids not to be on there, but,
No, okay.
Word from me, they'll do the complete opposite, of course.
So conscious of time, there's 2 questions that I ask at the end of every interview, and I really like this bit because actually I learned something, and I always learn everything as well, not just the Everton thing, but likewise. Would you be happy to share the best piece of advice you've ever had?
I've had, I mean, in terms of business, just look after the pennies, make sure that you know what your contracts are costing you, that you don't overstretch yourself, that you're making money, that you're allowed to make money. I mean, there is this thing in recruitment. I think some businesses think that we shouldn't be, that we should be a free service. Well, no, we're not the job centre for any of you clients out there listening. But we're not out to rip anybody off either. We want to be valued for what we do. But I would certainly say, look after your finances, make sure that you know how much your product or your service is costing you. And go out there and make money. That's what it's all about. That's what we as business owners want to do, and it's not to keep it all for yourself, it's to share the success. So there is that. And also, as I said before, just don't be so obsessive about quality, about service delivery. Perfection doesn't exist,
but you can still strive for it.
And I always will, but I think sometimes I'm too obsessive, and I put pressure on people, I put pressure on the staff. Is that me saying I'm a tyrant or a dragon?
I don't think you're a tyrant.
I just, it's my name above the door, and I just want us to deliver the best that we can. And we do. We don't always get it right, which business does. But it's not for the want of trying. It literally is not. But I would say just chill a bit. The clients understand we're dealing with people. They will let you down, but yeah. So look after the pennies, and the pounds will look after themselves. And chill. Take some time out.
I agree with you on the time out one, because I worked most of this weekend doing my own stuff, and I feel tired today, and today's Monday, and I think something I need to get better at is actually taking time off to just mentally just switch off. And obviously it's just to sustain at a high level. So for instance, one of my early guests was a guy called Matt McGough from Ithaca Films, and he made the point in his best advice was actually, in business, it's a marathon, not a sprint. Why are you trying to do everything in 1 year? Take your time. There's no need to rush.
Or 31.
Or 31. But that's a fair shift to put in and actually keep going.
Well, Ashley is dying for me to get going. And will I retire? I don't know. Work has... I think just some people love work. Yeah. And I think I'm just one of those people. Or they love building
something, whatever that thing is.
It isn't even about that. It's not even about, but I think it's probably building something and leaving it
as a legacy.
Yeah. And having Ashley take it on, and the rest of the people that are in the business as well, because it's not just me. I haven't achieved this on my own. It's kind of, a lot of people in the team. So yeah, but I will always have to do something. I'll probably go and save animals somewhere, or I don't know.
Ash said, yes, she is waiting for you to retire, just to throw this out.
I know she is. It's coming, don't worry.
If you were to give advice to your younger self, and you can pick the girl at Everton Football Club, you can be any age, whatever you want, what would it be? I think it'd be interesting, actually, especially when you had your first year, you're about to meet the bank manager, you're worried that this thing that you've put your savings in or whatever into is going to go tits up. What would you say to that person? Because actually, I imagine a lot of stuff went through your brain at that point where...
Do you know, I've always been resilient. I have crap days where I just think, do you know what? I hate this job. But then I allow myself, say, 24 hours to feel sorry for myself. And then that is my challenge, is to get over that feeling, and not to allow myself for any longer than, say, 24 hours to be low or feel down. Sometimes it doesn't always work out like that, but I'm just very resilient. I try, and I always know that, what's the worst that can happen? It's not life or death. Get on with it. And I know because of my own resilience that I'll do it.
Yeah.
If I just keep bashing away, if I just keep having the conversations that I have with people, that, I think it's when you give up that it all turns to crap, really. So just never give up. Just do what you do is probably what I would say to myself.
Yeah, cool. So just as we start to wrap up, what time are we on? At 4:56. What's next for Westray? What's the dream? What are you going to be doing over the next kind of 6-12 months?
Okay, so 31 years on, which has been a tough gig. We've discovered that. The business is still ambitious. For whatever time I have left in this business, I am still ambitious. Now, we've got strong foundations built on 31 years of hard slog. But I've got kind of Ashley's in the business now. She's ambitious. She wants to do things. We've got 3 offices. We have got plans to expand that. And to expand our service offering. At the moment, I want to get the wellbeing at Westray set up. The Westray Net Zero, which is our green initiative that we've not spoken about, but I'm very keen on the environment. So we've got that in the pipeline. So watch this space, everybody. And, just having the business reach its potential. You know, I've had a difficult journey in that I've raised 3 kids. You know, I've had other things that I've been focused on as well, not just the business, but this business has so much potential and still such a long way to go, that over the next few years, then it's going to change, because that's going to be Ashley and the management team to take that on. So I'm really excited myself to see where the business goes, to be honest with you. I won't be in it any longer than 5 years. That is an absolute given. It might be earlier than that. Who knows?
Wow. Well, I appreciate your time. I think I'll kind of start to wrap up. But just as a fellow business person, I see you interact most days. Just, I think in some ways, yeah, you're right. It's the resilience which always really impresses me, and actually just the desire to just keep pushing, keep getting it better. And, you know, how do you make the team better, and how do you develop the team? And actually just the ambition that, you know, I can't promise in 10 years time that I'll be as passionate about what I'm doing as I am now. So never mind 30, and just to keep going. And I think it's just, I was always really keen to kind of share your story and what people have been through. And actually, even just for Ashley's benefit, just knowing a bit more about what her mum got up to when she was younger. But no, thank you for your time. It's been a pleasure to kind of catch up, and I'm sure I'll see you again soon.
All right. Thank
No worries.
you.
Have a nice
Thank
day.
you.
Cheers.
See you
Bye-bye.
soon. Bye.